Uh, you are going live. Don't put
Yeah, live.
me. I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, we are live. We are
Welcome to the
ready. We are
Pride of
live.
Symbols, a people driven by the passion for excellence and the courage to take on big challenges and see them through. With integrity of mind and systems, our words,
I'm trying to
structures,
play
and
an art
processes
that
are
will.
always dependable. We are proud of who we are, what we do, and what we stand for. Firm is our commitment to the vision to build a globally recognized distribution company and to become the key driver of trade revolution across Africa. We have been empowered to make products and services accessible, affordable, and usable across Africa by building. Welcome to the Welcome to the Pride of Symbols, a people driven by the passion for excellence and the courage to take on big challenges and see them through. With integrity of mind and systems, our words, structures, and processes are always dependable. We are proud of who we are, what we do, and what we stand for. Firm is our commitment to the vision to build a globally recognized distribution company and to become the key driver of trade revolution across Africa. We have been empowered to make products and services accessible, affordable, and usable across Africa by building an efficient distribution network and to remain the market benchmark for dynamism, efficiency, and competitiveness. We are rulers. We provide order. With confidence, enthusiasm, and wit we speak. The vulnerable and voiceless we empower. This is me. This is TD Africa. We rule. We conquer. We are Simba.
Hey, hello everyone. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in any part of the world. Uh, Today,
Hello, everyone.
we are happy to receive
Hello,
and see every
good
one of
morning,
you on the
good
call.
afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are.
And then today, we'll be having one of our sections on the Nigerian Azure community platform. Today, we'll be having a section on describing Azure management and governance. And I'm happy to be a moderator for the show today. And then I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. His name is Mr. Oluwaseyi Oluwamiju. He's a solution-focused, team-oriented technical consultant and a Microsoft valuable professional, a Microsoft MVP. He has a lot of broad-based experience and hands-on skills in implementation of highly effective Microsoft infrastructure deployments, and then he has been doing this for over a lot of years. It's an MCT regional lead in Africa, and he's an IT consultant with over 19 years. I want to say that again, 19 years of experience in IT. He's skilled in areas of SharePoint, Office 365, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft servers, and then we're happy to have him on our show today on describing Azure management and governance. So I'll be introducing him, having him on this call. Mr. Oluwaseyi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can, I can hear you. If you can hear me.
Yes, yes, perfectly. I can hear you. So
Okay.
we are happy to have you on the call today. So what is in for us today on this section?
Yes, for this section, actually, I tag this particular track in Azure Fundamental as taking back control. um, control in sense of governance, in sense of being able to have access to what you use, know
Mhm.
what you how you work with what you use and how it costs you. And that's one major factor that bridge the gap between management and IT consulting and IT department. And for Azure, it has been taken care of in Azure way to be able to give you tools that can help you to know what you need to do, how much you need to spend, and how you need to go about it. So that's what we are going to do today. We're going to look at how to take the control, how to regain the control, and we're going to look at tools, and we have a slide demo, and I can take question from the audience.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to learn from you and learn from your wealth of experience. And then this is one section I've been looking really forward to, to hear and also describe how to get governance around, the Azure platform and the management. So I'll be handing over to you to take it
Yeah.
over from you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. And just as Paul has rightly giving us the intro of who we are, I also want to emphasize that the fundamental track which the Azure team group is trying to bring is to be able to give us a fundamental knowledge on how to use certain features which is necessary for Azure and how to control it and how to govern it. So we're going to look at the first thing here, which is how do we take back our control? Now, the question now you might ask yourself, what are you taking control from? Now, I'll give you several scenarios why we need to look at governance as an ability for IT to take back control. Now, for example, we know that the cloud technology has come to stay. And the emphasis here is to be able to guide ourselves in on how to balance human experience with the technology we have. And that means that for everything I do, I should be able to address the issue of the cost. I should be able to organize my cost in a fashion that can easily be addressed to the number of things I'm using per time. And if I'm not going to use these resources, if I'm not going to use this application, if I'm not going to use this virtual machine, what does it cost me? What can I tell the management in next 3 years? Then another aspect of it is the hybrid scenario. How do I look at my cost when I want to move to the cloud against what I'm presently using on my current on-prem environment? So leveraging this solution bring us to what Azure has and how Azure can help us as an IT manager, as an IT administrator, as a governance and compliance officer that work on Azure. How do I maintain the sanity of my costs, blend it with efficiency, and ensure that my resources is managed in a very fashionable manner? Now, it takes us to look at holistic how technology is revolving across several parts of and several span of our technological innovation. We know technology is innovating every year, and the cloud technology, the advent and the injection of cloud technology has brought in what we call a great booster, and that booster is the empowerment. Just like we know when there's an advert about the this energy booster. Now, when you watch that advert, what it's telling you is that naturally you have energy. Naturally, we all know that we have been used to creating our own environment, our private cloud where we have to get our own server, get people with knowledge to manage it, giving our cooling and the rest. But the advent of the cloud technology is just like look as a boost that boosts what you have, energize you. And this energy that is coming towards computing generally across the world is lying upon what we refer to as the technology innovation via the cloud inputs. Now, this also help us is a progressive thing. That's why we find out that I always give the disclaimer whenever I'm doing training, I'm giving a speech that whatever you see today that I'm presenting in next few hours or few days or week might have changed, because the progression of cloud technology is a consistent thing. And that brings us to the point of how do we govern this? Because it is a rapid changing environment, a rapid changing situation, a rapid changing scenario that sometimes what you want by the projection you have now might have changed in next few days, might have changed in next few weeks. How do we concentrate on managing this progress? And we know one factor we cannot erase in any technology is human need. What does my business need? How do I dictate to my business and how I'm going about it? What are the cost implications for my business? Now, what is the efficiency this technology is going to bring when I put into the business? Now, we have several tools that Microsoft we're going to look as we look at this topic. Several tools that Microsoft have injected into the system, like TCO, being able to manage what you have on-prem against when you are going to migrate, shift to the cloud. Or we have the calculator, which help you to calculate in reference to what you are doing and how you are working with the technology and how much it will cost you. Then we look at the advent of how we're going to look at it from the Azure perspective, which is called cost management environment, where on Azure we can know how much you are spending and you can easily get a report and you can easily project on how your enterprise can increase in usage, increase in the cost, and increase on the efficiency you are going to get from it. Now, let's quickly now go into taking back control. As you can see here, the cloud technology is a flavor. Now, we have flavor of application running, not only application, database injection, not only about your database, also helping you to streamline into things like video injection, document storage, and also it also helps you to build application, app services, web services. All these services are all in trickle of eyes of different silo that is bounded by the Azure community. That means by the Azure infrastructure. That means Azure is like a fundamental state by which, or platform by which everything you build on the Azure cloud model, you can actually manage it from there. Now, because we have different applications running, because we constantly our need increases when it comes to technology innovation, and the progression is continually increasing. But we have a problem here, and that problem is, how do I manage it? How do I group all these applications into one? How do I map it, target, to be able to know how much each of these applications cost me? Now, for example, if I'm going to deploy an application that is an app application, a web application, what are the requirements that is required for me to be able to use it? Now, a web application requires you to have a database online. You can either use an my SQL server, you can use a Microsoft SQL server, you can use my Microsoft SQL or Azure database, Azure SQL server. All these are things that are trickle to cost relation. And because it's cost related, you need a control. You need to take it back. You need to be able to understand how you can regain this. Now, there are three ways you can regain this control. One, the first thing is the costing. Now, over the years of my experience, I noticed, and most time I've been in situation where, for example, there was a particular company I was managing. I was actually managing their environment, and I was just like an IT officer. They are into research. Then one day, the MD actually called up the IT department, which I was very new there, and he said he wants to be able to have a website, and it was to be able to have the website to have certain category of research, certain things, and the right. Now, stating all those things, his requirement for me is, what is the cost for it? How do I ensure that it is properly, it is secured? And how do I maintain compliance, especially for those that will be buying the research material online? How do I integrate it and infuse it into a gateway? And all these are things that was laid before me. Now, you can see here that deploying a solution, then that was way back in 2003. Not talking of what we have now, which is the energy booster that we have through cloud. We are saying now, at that time, the management needs to have a bridge and understanding how much it costs, how much it will take them to be able to get an external facing website. And that external facing website must be able to cost them certain amount, and they need to know how long will this cost be maintained over the period of time, how secure this website will be, what are things I need to put in place to make it secure. Is it the firewall I need to put from my own on-prem server, the gadget I need to buy, then how compliant this will be to the policy internally and to the policy that the external people need to look at before they can have access to this material. Now, that is like a mind-boggling thing for me at that time when I was still an IT officer. And what is it telling me now? It's telling me now that deploying application does not just, we don't just look at it from the application perception. We have to look at it from, how do we gain control of this? How do we govern this? How do we ensure that what the establishment is going to pay they are going to get their return of investment? The TCO must be highly addressed before we even deploy it. So gaining control with Azure governance and management maintenance means it builds on three pillars. The first pillar is the cost. The second pillar is to ensure it is secured. The third pillar is to ensure that it has what we know as compliance. Now it brings us to an automation process. Now that process can be drawn out into 4 different process lines. The first one is, how do I must first review my requirements. I must first review my requirements. Once I review my requirement, I know what I want, I know what the business wants, and ensure I know the cost it takes them to have it. Then I organize it, because without organizing it, there is no way you can track it. There's no way you can get report. There's no way you can be able to know what they are using per time, per hour, per minute. Now, when you're organizing it, you can organize it, for Azure generally, there's what we call resource group. Now, resource group is like combining everything you require for that particular application you are deploying. Now, you are grouping them into a container. You are bringing them into a box. And each of those boxes has a cost implication. And each implication can easily be individually singled out, and to be able to have holistic cost for that. Once you have organized it, you need now to be able to have a regular track process. And that track process is auditing each of this material, auditing it per time, per usage, because it's easy for you to use cloud technology to scale out and scale in, or scale up or scale down. As you are doing that, you are auditing it, and you are ensuring that you have a compliance system, which are processes, which are policies that Azure himself has already put in place, that you can easily to enforce across all your resources that you are going to use. Now, what we are doing at that time is to be able to use Azure to gain control. Now, let's look like, Azure control and governance. Now, the aspect of governance came into IT when it was noticed that for you to have a very smooth deployment, whether you're a data analyst, whether you're an Azure administrator, whether you are a DevOps or a developer that works on Azure or the cloud technology, it is very essential to have a way by which you manage and ensure that certain policies that you are put in place, and that policy need to be governed, need to be addressed per time, and that also can give you the ability to control it. Now, let's look at general norm that we need to know when it comes to control and governance. One of those norms is the kobo and naira. Every establishment, every business owner, every management want to know how much they are spending, and which is very real, because I told you my experience, and there was a time also I was working in a consulting firm, a good partner then. Then we had several consultation with certain companies. There's one of them we had is an industry, the manufacturing company. They are one of the pioneer cement manufacturing country in the inside of the western Nigeria. And at that time, we are consulting for them, and they were trying to implement what we call um, um, an application that can run via document management across each of their um, facilities. They have one facility at two in Ogun State, one in Lagos, and they want us to create. And they were already incorporating some other places like Kenya, like I think another place was Kenya, France, or something. And they want us to look at holistically what design can we deploy for them. Now you can see now what the IT manager was asking us as consultant is, how much will it cost me if I want to have a document management system across Lagos, Ogun State, France? How many servers do I need? Implication. What network devices do I need to deploy? How much man hour is required for us as crewmen to deploy it? And all this review needs to come into place before he can take a decision to his own top manager and say, oh, for us to be able to deploy it across all these facility that we have our industry, we must be able to have certain servers, certain firewall, certain devices. Now, the cloud technology is a combo because we are not having that headache anymore, like what I did about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. What it's telling us now is that the cloud technology brings us to a point by which all the resources are things that you can pick from a calculator, from a particular environment, and choose each of the costs and merge it together in addition, in multiplication, in to get what it will cost you to be able to deploy that service. Now, another question that is required and need to be reviewed, that is because the resources you want to use, how much you want to spend, is tied to the resources you need. For example, if I want to build a web app, now on Azure, I know I need a database. That could be a requirement. That could be one of the resources. I need to have a storage. Maybe I have so many unstructured content that I need to have a blog account. I need to have a blog storage. I need to have an account that resides there. I need to have a vault that is secured for me. Then the other question is, when I'm going to roll out this application, what are the governance? What are the compliance principles that I need to put in place? Now, once I have that, then the fourth thing I need to do is when I'm trying to control and govern my environment, is to focus on the effort required, how long it will take, and that means specking your resources against the time, because that also in the long run determine how much it will you have to cough out as a business to be able to run that. Now, once we have that, we can also review this across certain application application that runs on Azure. One of them is resource graph. Resource graph is like a graph that help you to tie each of your resources like a web. How many of you have seen a spider web? Now, the way the architecture of a spider web is like an enclosure that is interwoven with each other, and each enclosure, irrespective of the connector which the spider used to connect it across its web, stand on its own, and they are interwoven. Now, the resource graph help you to go into each resources that you are using, whether you are using it on Azure database or you are using on Azure app application or an API that run on Azure. The resource graph pull these resources, put it in a group to manage it, and ensure that each individual is identified in terms of the cost. Then, once you have the resources put together in a graphical way, the next thing is each of these individual resources will be pulled out as is related to the cost. Now, once you have that cost, you already know the resources, you are through the graph, you know the cost. Now, the other thing is, how do you roll this out? In rolling this out, you must look at security. Are you going to place it on a role-based access control? Are you going to ensure that it's compliant to certain degree of governance that comes from the governing body across the cloud sphere? Now, once you have that, it comes into your review. Then you now begin to organize it. Now, organizing your resources, because you have already brought it together, you have already mapped it with the cost, you have also been able to look at what it entails for you to make it secure. The next thing is to create what we call how you gain access to these resources by subscription. Now, each subscription can be placed on hierarchy. You can classify those resources against each subscription. And once you have that, you now begin to control the aspect which the security has to come in. Who have access to what? When do they have the access? Is it a role-based access control you're going to put on each of these resources, and how they can, because the accessibility of your user also contribute on how they turn on the tap to allow the resources usage. Once you are able to control with this three level, you'll be able to organize your resources. Now, also, there are other ways you can organize your resource. You can organize it by creating what we call management groups. You can organize it by using tagging. Now, each tagging is just like a means by which you put your resources and tag it to its identify usage. And each of these usage can easily be spun up from the grouping on how much it will cost for you to use it. You can also organize it by having what we call role-based access control across each of these resources. Who has access to this? Who can have access to that? And how long can they have access to each resource? It can be time-based. And all this gives you what we call an hierarchical root management group environment. Now, this is an example of what we can do by group managing it by group. You can see the root group can be the application itself. Now, there are several tentacles that is going to. One, maybe the application would be interfacing with human resources. The application definitely will interface with IT, will interface with marketing, and will also need to probably the establishment or the business have an enterprise subscription with Microsoft. Now, as we are rolling out this application, you should be able to deduce from the subscription we have how much we have against how much you are using, and how much each of these department is using concerning each of these resources we are using. Now, you can run it, as you can see here. It runs towards For human resources, they need to develop some application, test it. For IT, they run it from production. Now having it in each of the group or the geographical location they have, and each of the subscription they have is actually trying to check in to what you are using and how much it will cost the establishment in rolling out this application that IT is rolling. Also for marketing, you can see here, for marketing sake, because we because we know it's marketing, instead of spending more money on getting subscription, we can use free subscription, and each of these subscription is mapped to that marketing application we are rolling out, and we can easily manage it by a group spectrum. Now let's look at another aspect. We have seen how we can bring our resources together, pull it out from our resource graph, get the cost from it, ensure that each of these costs is managed. Then another aspect is monitoring. Now, in terms of monitoring, you must have a way by which you can monitor. And one aspect that Azure has given us when it comes to governance and management is audit. What is audit? Audit generally is ability to be able to spec out what you are doing by developing policies. And each of the policies, now these policies is regulation. When it comes to policy, we are talking of regulation. And when talking of regulation, we are talking of standard. And each of standard, for example, you can say for this application to be deployed, it must be running on certain .NET framework. It must be running on certain application from the end user, maybe Windows 10, Windows 7. All this policy, you put it out. When you develop it and you are trying to audit your application, vis-a-vis what you have placed at your policy against what is attainable will be deducted by the auditing solution, by the auditing tray. Then you now apply how much it will cost. So as the auditor is working and your auditing solution is working on your environment, it's also looking at how much it will cost per budget. Maybe the budget you have from your application is to place like a $5,000 on your Azure application, Azure, excuse me, Azure framework, and you ensure that each of these audit solution help you to apply the budget. And as is applying this budget, it will also emphasize and ensure that the impact of it is actually roll out, and that brings you to the point of enforcement, because audit help you to guide, audit help you to monitor, audit help you to be able to get what it takes for you to apply certain application, certain policy, and how far and how long this will last you as an establishment. Audit can be done from either you create what we call Azure policy and run the Azure policy on your digital estate, or you look at what we call a cost management solution that we have currently on Azure, which we are going to look when we get to the demo side, where you can actually see how much it takes, how much, see the policy you have already put in place to ensure that all this material are actually working in compliance. Enforcement is one aspect of governance that takes a lot of things. Now, we can see even generally why we are having decay in the society is because the people that are supposed to enforce law that is brought out from the Senate, from the House of the Rep, from the state governing body, from the state House of Assembly, the enforcers are nowhere to be found. And whenever there is no enforcement, it shows us that at that time there is no way that this policy can be properly managed and implemented. So for you to enforce it, Azure have given us an environment. Once this policy is created, it ignites the ability to enforce it. Now, as you go on, you can actually change those policy, try to add resolution if it is required. You also need to enforce the budget, and also you can create your own subscription. So enforcement can be run across policies from Azure. You can enforce policy from cost management solution, or you can create what we call Azure blueprint across your enterprise. Now, let's quickly now look at how do we regain the control. Just as we're going to see in the demo, to regain your control, you must first of all review what you have, the application you want to run, how you want to run it, look at the resource that you need to use, ensure that are grouped and are tied into one container, then ensure that it's compliance in terms of security. You organize it now, because each of these applications runs across each department. How much are they using? What does it take to roll out to each step, to multiple departments and multiple users? Then you tag it and ensure that as this is rolling out, it is role-based. Then you audit those policy, ensure it's compliance, is forcing, is working against what you have put. And once you have audited, you have know what it takes, you enforce it. And once you enforce it, you have already gained control and you have implement governance across your enterprise. Now let's look at, in review, you must understand first of all what you are spending and why. 2, you must ensure that your resources is properly approved. From the review going to the audit, it ensures that those policies are implemented and those policies are properly enforced before you can actually use it or deploy it. Then you must also know that there are best practices, which are policies, compliance policies that are out there that Azure has already put in place for you that can allow you to be able to work across what you are doing. Then the last thing is to ensure that at interval, because it's a process, it's continuous, you continue to improve what you have. Now let's quickly look at some tools that we have. Now the first tool we have is price calculator. Now what price calculator help you to do is to explore each of the products. It can also help you to give you samples. It can also help you to give estimate. And if you have any question and answer, it helps you. So if you explore the calculator, you add your services, you configure it, and once you configure it, you add all those resources you need, then you review it and deploy it. Now, another thing that you can use when it comes to governance is what we call Tco Calculator, which is to be able to know in nutshell what it means is that I want to deploy my workload to Azure. I know how much I'm spending on-prem. I want to be able to compare if I'm going to move it to Azure, how much will it take? So you use the Tco calculator to define your workload, and you can adjust it to have the best assumption that you have on-prem on Azure. Then you can view the report, and when you view the report, you can easily deploy it. Then another thing that we have that we can use to control, that we can use to control and govern our environment on Azure is using Azure Cost Management. Now, Azure Cost Management, as you can see here, it gives you how much in graphical way, how much you are spending across a time bound. You can see from first quarter to the last quarter to the last day or that you are using, how much you are spending per month, the total actual cost you are spending, and you can have it break down in color code, telling you each of the location how much you are actually spending. Now, this also gives you a guide generally on how to control your resources and to maintain what you need. Now we are going to quickly go into the demo right now, but I don't know whether there's any question before we go to the demo. I will go into my event. Is there any question why I launched my browser? Is there any question, Paul? Finding it difficult to launch my browser. So I will reshare my slide again. Okay, thank you. No question. So let's quickly go to okay. Now let's start with the price calculator. Now, as I said, price calculator, how do you get to price calculator? Just go to azure.microsoft.com, and I'm using English US pricing, and you have calculator. Now, calculator is generally the same time as calculator, and what it does for you is to be able to know how much you are going to use if you are going to deploy certain resources on Azure. Mind you, we have already mapped our resources under resource group, which is very important. You have already mapped it. Each of them have what we call a resource graph that pile up this resource. We have also looked at a way to target. Once you tag those resources, it's easy for you to manage it across your whole digital enterprise when it comes to Azure. Now, let's look at price calculator. Once you get to price calculator, the first thing you see is they have all your products from the popular one, which is virtual machine, storage account, database. If you are running Kubernetes services, or you want to run some modernized, scalable, high efficiency application through Cosmos DB, or if you are running an app services, or if you are going to execute what we call automation from the Azure perspective, having a serverless environment, you can look at Azure Function. If you are going to run AI, some cognitive services on your Azure environment, you have it there. Then you have the management of, if you are going to manage your cost by Microsoft management cost. These are the popular one that is usually there. Then you can also search for it if you want to search for it. Now, apart from that, it also by the extreme left hand side, you see other category. It's categorized under compute. It's categorized. Compute require the machine, the services, the app services, the container instance, the VM, the virtual desktop. Now, those are all computing power. If it's networking, each of the network load balancing gateway you need to have. Now, it's also categorized into storage, into web, into mobile containers, as containers, especially if you want to run things like AKS and the rest on your environment. Then if you are going to look at cost of your database, you can also look at the database you single it out and choose each of them. If you are going to analytic down, now you can see each of these category even run down to Internet of Things, hybrid and multi-cloud environment. Now we can gradually see that the way cloud technology is evolutionizing is that is moving not just for Azure. We can see people expert that have some environment have a multi-cloud environment. You have still have AWS, they have Google Cloud's environment, and they are running it for their business, each of the applications. So Azure also, you can also have a way by which you want to calculate how much it will cost you to be able to run across each of these other multi-cloud when you are doing your calculation. So let's just quickly take a typical example. Another way is to look at example scenario. Now, example scenario gives you specific business case study. Now, each of these business case study tells you how much it will cost you. For example, if you're going to use, like, you want to have an advanced analytics on big data, these are all you require. You need to have the injection of the data. That means you need to have the cost of Azure Synapse. You need to have a storage because it's a large bulk of store of data. You need to have like an Azure data lake storage, and you also need to have it on Power BI, you need to have. So these are the product that is required for you. Now, this scenario, as example scenario, help you to tie down holistically all the solution and how much it will cost you. You can see if you are going for this particular one, for Azure Synapse, Azure services, these are all the resources required and how much it will take. Now, if I'm going to go for machine learning, for example, it also gives you the design. It also helps you to look at how much it will cost. And for example, for this is what you need to have: a real-time machine learning. You need to have a machine learning studio. You need to have Power BI. You need to have a load balancer for high traffic. You need to have Key Vault for security. You need to monitor it from Azure. And if you are going to run it with Kubernetes services that includes container solution, you need to have the registry. You need to have a Gen 1 lake, data lake, to allow influx of high unstructured data that can easily be managed on your own digital estate. And once you have that, you add the estimate, it will help you to know how much. Now, you can actually add your own estimate and it gives you that. Now, once you have your estimate, you can actually save it. And once you save it, you can download it. You can look at it in terms of the price, in terms of the monthly. So you can still go back there to be able to look at it. And it also gives you a FAQD where you can ask all those questions that is required for you to know how to govern your environment and ensure compliance, to know how much it will cost and where you can get partnership agreement from Microsoft. Once you have this, you can also look at that. So let's quickly look at one and move to the other one. Let's say, for example, let's look at a popular one. I want to deploy a virtual machine. Now this virtual machine can either be a Windows virtual machine or a Linux virtual machine. Now, what the calculator does is that it helps you to add it. You can see when I view it, it takes me to where the virtual machine is. And by default, it tells you, if I'm going to have this virtual machine, this is the one he recommends for me, and looking at how much it will cost monthly for me. Then I can actually modify this if I don't want to. For example, if I have, if I want to go for discounted one, once I say for discounted one, you can see the price also changes. It tells you it changes from $152 to $125. That means because I've changed one of the criteria. Now, the calculator make it very easy for you to be able to know. Now, you can also change the region. For example, if I want to go to South Africa, which is close to Africa, South Africa North, it also has its own cost implication. You can see once I change it to South Africa North, and I'm using the same estimate as I use with Western US, you can see the dollar price, the monthly price changes, because from $125, it went to $120. That shows me that criteria like distance, like my proxy to my server region, also help in determining the cost. Now, other things that we can also change is when you are using the Linux instead of Windows, you can see Linux operating system is cheaper than even the Windows. So if you are running a Linux on Ubuntu type at a standard tier, you can see that you can have lesser amount with the same spec of the server and the same virtual machine. Now, if you can also look at some tier you want, you can either use a basic tier or a standard. For example, if I change to a basic tier and I'm running it from a South African data center under a Linux server, you can see I am going to buy this virtual machine at a $0.05. Now, it also tells me how many hours I can use it, and but there are some things that we need to know, that pricing is not available for your selection. Now, this tells me that even this insignificant 0.05 is telling me that South Africa North might not be able to give me. Now let's move to Western. I think another one that is close to us is UK West. Let's see whether that is available. You can see it is available at pay as you go. Let's use for 1 year. Sorry, you can only give me for pay as you go at $14, and the hours, the instance you can run, the instant against both. I'm using Linux. If I take it to Windows, the price also will increase. If I take it back to Windows on Western, you can see the price will also increase. Okay, it's the same thing Linux or Windows when you are in the North UK West. Now sometimes you might already have your license, or you have Azure hybrid benefit that you have with Microsoft by licensing. You can change your licensing type. You can also change your server, your disk type. You can add storage transaction you want. You can also be able to manage your bandwidth, especially when it comes to connection. And once you have all this, you can export this into your system. And once you export it, it becomes like a normal Excel file. You can see it here. When you open it, it gives you the same description you have here. Now, it helps you to have what got ability to control what you want to buy, and this by which you can interface with your establishment. And because of my time, I'll be running. Once that open up, I'll show you. Let's go to the total cost of ownership. Now, total cost of ownership is a tool that Microsoft deploy to also be able to have what we call a defined way to be able to differentiate your workload as you are using an on-prem against where you are going. Now, for example, you define your workload, you adjust your assumption, and you ensure you view the report. Now, for example, if I'm going to create a workload, for example, I want to deploy, I must first add the workload. What kind of workload I want to add, how much it will cost me. You can see this is one RAM, one CPU. These are things I can change. This I can change the kind of server, whether it's an app I want to build. You want a physical, I want a virtual server, and I want it on Linux. Then it takes me, am I using auto scale? Am I optimizing the CPU? How many RAM do I want? I can adjust the RAM. I want maybe 20 gig RAM. Then once I have done that, I can add additional server workload. And for most web app, just as I have here, I must have a database. Let me add a database. What kind of database do I want to use? I want to use a database that runs on MySQL server, PostgreSQL server, SQL server, Oracle, Extract. Let's just use my SQL server. Is it a standard edition you want to have? Now, what I'm trying to do here is to be able to manage my total ownership, total cost of ownership, ensuring that what I have on-prem is also the same thing. And if I'm going to deploy it online, it should be the same. Because if not, that means I'll be wasting my resources and wasting the money. Now, once you have that, I've added the database, I need to have the storage. What kind of storage do I want? Do I have a local one, or have a SAN or blob storage? How much it's going to be? What terabyte? Let's just leave it at the default. Then the next thing you click next, it goes to adjusting. Then this is where you begin to manipulate what you need. Do you want it against an assurance coverage? Do you want it against a particular geolocation? Do you want your virtual machine to be cost per hour? Do you want it your storage? You can see the amount of the storage. Once you have that, you can actually manipulate what you have. Now that brings you, as an IT manager, as an IT an Azure administrator, be able to compare. If I'm going to move all this application database to the cloud, how much will it cost, and how much am I spending running it currently? Now, once you have that, you go to the next, then it gives you the total. Now, the total now tells you how much it will cost you per 1 month for 5 years. You can see the graph as it's growing, the cost will also be growing. Now, it also helps you to look at it vis-a-vis what you have on-prem against what you'll be, this on Azure, this on-prem. You'll be spending over a year per month, you'll be spending $82 total when you are running it on-prem, looking at the licensing, looking at the server, you need the networking, and against what you'll be having online from Azure, which is about 13,000. Now you can see the cost difference. You can easily manage this and be able to go to the establishment and say, come, for governing this particular environment, for ensuring we have regulation across this is how much we're going to cost. Because of our time, once you have that, you can download it, save it, or share it as you want. Now let's quickly go to the last one, which is the Azure Cost Management. Now, Azure Cost Management is a way by which you can look at what you are using. This is holistic solution that build it against your subscription. Just as I show you in that diagram, you look at your subscription against how much you are using, how much it will cost, what is remaining, and can easily give you what it takes. And it's graphical. It can tell you in graph. You can view all the subscription you have in terms of your billing, how it's been cost. When you have more, you can invoice it. You can look at the properties, and you can easily go to the support to be able to know what you are doing. I don't know if there's any question for me because I have 2 more minutes. Any question? So I can't hear. Is Paul saying something?
Yeah, no question. We just have
Okay.
like 2 minutes to the end of the section, so I don't know
Yes,
if
yes, I know.
we can be rounding up, sir. Yeah.
Okay, so generally, what we have here when it comes to cost management and using Azure governance, and is to how you take control, how you ensure that control is emphasized, and how to be able to manage your costs, how to group them and manage them properly. Thank you very much.
Wow, very wonderful section from our speaker today. Um, I have just a single question, and yeah, so on the Azure management, right?
Okay.
Now, for customers that have multiple subscriptions,
Okay.
um, what would be your advice to them on how to properly manage their subscriptions? They have different subscriptions, and they want to try to bring them together and manage it properly. So, what would be some kind of advices for that, sir?
Um, yeah, for me, um, first of all, you need to try to look at your subscription type. And one thing about Azure cost management on Azure, it helps you to look at all your subscription and also look at detail of how you are using it. Now, it gives you an advantage to know when to stop using certain devices or resources. Now, it also helps you to be able to detect when your budget, for example, if I've created a budget now, the budget, I add a new budget, maybe I change the scope, I try to filter. You can see I can try to filter my subscription type. Now create my budget. Now my budget is my guideline. Now if my budget on one subscription is $20, my budget on the other subscription is $30. Now each of the application I'm going to use, I'm going to map it when I'm trying to map the resource grouping. So if I'm deploying an application, I know I'm deploying on the $30, and within 1 year, that $30 will be sufficient for me. The cost management, and I put a budget that at $25, please, can you give me a cost alert? After analyzing it, a cost alert that can ensure that everything I'm doing is according to the compliance I've already placed there. So it gives me that advantage because I can holistically look at it through the graph, know where I'm going, and know how much is required for each of the resources. So it's all tied down to my planning when I want to build the resources. Where I'm mapping those subscriptions is because we find out that nowadays people have multiple subscriptions. You know why? Because sometimes each of our application need resources. New resources require new costs. New costs require new subscription. And each of them is tied as a recycled monthly review. And sometimes you need this kind of tool to manage it, to look at it for you, and to be able to give you alert if you don't have such. And you also have an advisor that can also give you a recommendation through the application.
Awesome.
I hope I
Awesome. Wonderful.
answered your question.
Yeah, perfectly, perfectly. Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Shei, for that wonderful section. You can follow Mr. Shei up on his social handles. I don't know if Mr. Shei can drop his social handle for people that want to
Okay.
ask questions, further questions, want to connect with you on LinkedIn, on Twitter,
Although
on
is
Facebook.
at SL Oluwamiju on Twitter. It's already okay. Let me just pull it up.
Okay.
Let me put my slide up again.
So perfect. So you can follow up Mr. Shei Oluwajimiju on LinkedIn and on the displayed address. Yeah, and then on Twitter and on Facebook. And you can also send an email to him if you have further questions on this section. We want to say thank you very much, Mr. Shei, for this wonderful section. And we want to tell everyone to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Nigerian Azure Community. We are a community that, we want to get some of the best of our engineers together talking about Azure and how we can influence and bring in new innovation into the digital footprint in Africa and in the world as a whole. So I want to say thank you very much, everyone, for joining this section, and we'll see you again next week.